Hello and welcome to episode 10 of Anime Figure Archive. I'm Senpai, and because of this milestone, I have something very special for you. Beside me is a figure that has truly reached Holy Grail status. And if you're a Yoko collector, you may consider this to be the Grail. It's a stunning figure, and I understand why it's considered to be a Grail among many people, but it has a major flaw that I don't really see anyone talking about. And once I've noticed it, I have a hard time unnoticing it. And because of that, to me, it's lost its Holy Grail status. In fact, if I lost my collection, I wouldn't buy it again. And to me, that's significant because I very much fancy Yoko. She's one of my favorite characters of all time. And in my figure collecting journey, she was the third character I ever collected. I started with Asuka from Evangelion, went to Hatsune Miku, and then Yoko. I first watched Gurren Lagann as a teenage boy, so Yoko was very much an original waifu of mine. She's absolutely badass and beautiful. I was so jealous of Kamina. But anyways, let's dive right in. I will discuss this flaw in the artistry section. To properly introduce her, this is Yoko Littner from Gurren Lagann. This is the mysterious bounty hunter version. It's made by Alter. It's a 1/8 scale and came out in July 2009 with an MSRP of 6,460 yen. This would have converted to $94.86 USD at the time. That's less than $100 for an Alter figure. And if you're not in the know, Alter is considered by many and myself to be one of the best anime figure brands. And as you'll find out in this review, 16 years later, she still holds up to the competition. And her aftermarket agrees, given that she's going for almost 76,000 yen on the secondhand market on AmiAmi. And quick disclaimer from Senpai from the future here, this video is going to be significantly longer than what you're used to for an anime figure archive video. On YouTube right now, the only videos I can find are 6, 7, and even 12 years old. And because of that, I've decided that I don't want to trim anything out of this video because I want this figure to be as documented as possible, particularly for those that are interested in obtaining this figure in the future. And Senpai wouldn't be Senpai without making a bunch of mistakes. This video made me realize that for the past 4 years, I've been displaying Yoko without her revolver in her holster. So I had to go into the crawl space of my house and find this box here, so lucky for you all and for the sake of archival purposes, we get to see what the box looks like. And a fun consequence of this is that we get to see the price that I paid for it at Mandarake. I paid 23,100 yen. This would have been around late 2013, 2014 era when I first started collecting. On top of that, I did buy her with a broken peg and still had to pay over 3 times her original MSRP. This figure has been popular for a really long time. So here's your first look at the entire box. I do have dimensions in the corner, and that weight includes the Yoko figure if it were inside of it. And here's your first full look at her. I do have the dimensions in the bottom corner. She seems quite tall for a 1/8 scale. In order to address this though, I do have to reveal a spoiler about the Gurren Lagann series. It's been almost 18 years, but if you don't want to be spoiled, you can check the chapters below and skip this next part in 3, 2, 1. As you may already know, there is a 7-year time skip in the Gurren Lagann series. Yoko beside me here is the adult 21-year-old version of Yoko and not the 14-year-old version. We know this because she doesn't have her iconic skull hairpin that normally sits right here, and because of the style of her boots. And here's a quick side-by-side with teenage Yoko on the left and adult Yoko on the right. Notice adult Yoko's lack of the hairpin and how tall her boots are versus the short low-cut boots and the stockings. I bring this up because Yoko's height is debated online. You'll see in many websites it's listed as 160 centimeters tall, which is roughly 5'2". And others will say it's between like 5'6" to 5'8", which is roughly about 172 centimeters tall. I have measured this Yoko here, and if she were standing straight up, I estimate her to be about 21.5 to 22 centimeters tall. Multiply that by 8, and we're all over that 172 centimeter mark, which is around 5'6", 5'7". And assuming that both those numbers are accurate, and it's actually just teenage Yoko versus adult Yoko, this is an accurate scale representation. And this would explain why this figure feels tall to me, because the majority of her figures are of teenage Yoko. Let's transition to the paint. If you've ever owned an Alter figure, been around one, or just seen our reviews on them, it's exactly what we've come to expect from Alter. In a good way, of course, and even more impressive given that this is 16 years old. We like to start with the hair, but I'll go ahead and tell you that all paint on this figure is clean. I see no clumping anywhere, and there's shading on almost every aspect. We see a cool technique with her hair. The PVC is a lighter color, and what they've done is they've come back and airbrushed this red. That's why in the crevices here where the paint is naturally thinner, you can see that it's much lighter. And because of that, it's kind of an inverse highlighting where it's actually darker down the inside, but from afar, it looks like we get a bunch of highlights, and then of course the shininess of the paint gives us more on top of that. We see darker airbrushing on the top of her head, the tip of her hair here, and on the midpoint of her ponytail. Looking at the gun, we can see this really pretty metallic gray, and they do have shading throughout to give it a slightly weathered look. They've got darker shading around the magazine itself and where the magazine inserts on the grip. We've got it around the scope and even at the end of the stock. The decal is applied nicely. We can also see different colors on the lens itself when it comes to the scope on this side. And if we continue all the way around, we can see it on the different lenses on the other side. This level of shading does continue to the muzzle brake, and we can see some shading on the backside right here, and these bands do look really clean. For her face, the eye decals and eyebrows are very crisp. We do not see any blush. Looking at the bikini top, the flame itself looks really good, and we do see a bit of shading where the cup meets the necktie. Looking at her jacket, we'll start with this area here. We can see a similar technique to the hair. It appears they've done a light airbrushing over the top edge of everything because we can see that the inside of the folds are lighter than the tops of them. But the effect overall looks good. On this band at the end of her sleeve, they actually used a wash to darken the inside lines. The most prominent area of shading on her jacket is actually on her coattails where they're worn. We can see the shading on both sides here, and it's also on the inside of the jacket. This is also a good time to take a look at the buckles. You can see the buckle right here is extremely clean. And that's also true of the buckles on the sniper rifle here and here. Moving on to my favorite part of her outfit is going to be her holster. For the belt, once again, we can see a very clean buckle, but the most impressive is that they actually used a wash to get in to all the stitching here. We talk about companies all the time needing to use a wash, and it's nice to see Alter taking advantage of that. It does a great job of bringing out all that stitch detailing. We can see the same wash technique on the side here, and they've also got airbrushing on the holster to give it some more depth. And the snap button is very clean. And this is as good a time as any to go ahead and show you the revolver that comes with Yoko. We can see a nice printing here for the wood grain of the grip, and once again a nice metallic paint with a dark wash to show you details. And here's your first look of what it looks like holstered. Moving back to the front, looking at her shorts, about the only area that I can really try to nitpick that's not super clean are going to be the buttons here. You can see that the paint does come out of the lines, but the zipper here does look good, and this is very much so me nitpicking. It's hard to show on camera, so I'll try to do it in an enhanced photo, but these shorts do have shading. We've got this kind of metallic blue for the shorts, and they have dark areas of gray over top for shading. And it's a little easier to see some of that gray I'm talking about here on the backside. Turning back to the front, looking at her stomach, this is the only area of the skin that has shading. Similar to freeing bunnies, they've added highlights on the U-shape of her abs right here. This helps give tonality between the inside of the abs and on the sides. And lastly, looking at her boots, both are identical. The graphic work on the flames is nice and crisp, but we can see a line where the decals overlap here and over here. We see some light blue shading in the folds at the top, and then genuinely the only place that looks bad regarding paint is on her holster where it straps around the back of her leg. They had to hand paint this in, and it's not very clean, but you don't see it from the angle you display her at. And I'll go ahead and talk about the paint of the base while I'm here because it looks absolutely stunning. The colors that they chose and the weathering that they chose, I think is fantastic for this kind of rock and the scene that she's in. And interestingly enough, they've gone ahead and added shading where she's standing. It looks a little odd when we're zoomed in like this, but it's a lot more fitting as we zoom out. So as you can see, as a whole, the paint job is still exceptional, even by today's standards. It's crazy to think that this came out 16 years ago. Sure, I might want a little bit more depth out of like the hair, for example, but they're using techniques we talk about all the time wishing companies would use, such as a dark wash. Then add into the fact that this is only a 1/8 scale. It's by far one of the best paint jobs we have in our collection at this size, and because of that, it's going to get a 5 out of 5. When it comes to modeling quality, this isn't where the figure falls apart, but it is where you can start to see its age, at least in comparison to what you'd expect from a modern day Alter. I will point out where these are, but the one thing we do see in this figure throughout is flashing from the part lines of the mold. It's in significantly more areas than I would ever expect to see from a modern day altar. But a lot of this would just be cleaned up in modern times because manufacturing processes have just gotten that much better. Starting with the hair though, they've done a good job of keeping as large of segments together as they can. Each bang piece was added back in, and we can see that her ponytail is split into 2 pieces. We can see a lot of modeling detail here though where her hair is pulled back. This is something that Furyu didn't get right in their 300,000 yen Albedo Japanese doll. They can definitely take notes from Alter 16 years ago. For her face in terms of modeling, her mouth is modeled in, and you can see her lips and where her mouth parts. And although it's going to be really hard to show on camera, where her eyelid line is, even that's modeled in, with the decals of the eyes landing perfectly in those modeling lines. This angle here is also good at showing you all the modeling detail in her jacket. The folds of her scarf looks good, and the harsh wrinkles of her sleeves look good. From there, her bikini top has appropriate stretch marks here in the middle, and over on the edge where the necktie meets. Yoko's breasts are extremely round and perky, but this is part of her character design. So although it looks very unnatural or that she has like extreme implants or something, it is true to her character. To me, the stomach is the best cultured shot of Yoko, and you can even see her six-pack. I'm going to move her belt buckle up so you can see her shorts. As small as her shorts are, you can see lots of details in the wrinkles and stretch marks. And as you can see, they are quite tight. And looking at the back of the shorts, once again, ample wrinkles, and the one thing that Yoko does have is a flatter ass, so it's always nice to see representation of this body type. Moving down to her boots, once again, ample wrinkles and details where they're needed. I mentioned this figure has a lot of parting lines, but I haven't shown you a single one yet, and that's because, thankfully, you can't really see them from the angle you display them at, with the sole exception of the ones on the boots, which unfortunately are right front and center on each of the boots. I did mention the rest of the parting lines are hard to see, which also means they're hard to show on camera. So I'm going to make this easier and just do it from afar. The majority of the parting lines are going to be in the jacket itself and the gun. Starting with the jacket, we've got parting lines here on the inside on both sleeves, as well as the edge of the sleeves moving outward. One of the hardest things to mold are rounded cylinders, and because of that, the gun we can see parting lines on each side of the barrel. But the worst is going to be on the back of the scope, where we can even see where the gates are that attach it to the sprue. It almost looks like they took this gun straight from a model kit. So when it comes to modeling overall, there's lots of detail in this figure, and you can see that the sculpt is extremely impressive. But there are areas that would be more refined in a modern day altar figure, and things I wouldn't expect to see on a high-end scale figure. And because of that, it's going to get a 4 out of 5. The base will be pretty easy to talk about. Conceptually, it's pretty much the same as Ryuko Matoi's that we reviewed in episode 5, right? She's just standing on rock. But that's so much more engaging than just a basic plastic base. It does elevate the look of this figure because you can picture her standing on the edge of a cliff overlooking her prey. In this case, the base is a tad wider than Ryuko Matoi's, which kind of stopped at the edge of her feet. But if we back out a bit, we can see that it's visually aligned with other design elements in this figure. Something I do think this figure needs, though, are metal pegs. This is a figure where the pegs extend out from the feet. And I actually bought this in Japan with a broken peg on one of these feet, and later on the other one snapped too. So this figure has been re-glued to this base multiple times. And metal pegs would have prevented this. But I like it. It's obviously not a super elaborate E-string base, but the texture, modeling, and paint is good. It's clearly better than the average scale figure base, which is probably just a disc or a circle. But as I said, it could benefit from having metal pegs, so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. So now we've finally reached artistry, where I mentioned I would tell you the problem I have with this figure. And I wonder if some of you all have noticed it yet. But let's end the artistry section with that issue I have, and let's just talk about it conceptually at first. In terms of 2D versus 3D, this is definitely Yoko, albeit that certain representation we talked about in the spoiler section. As far as I can tell, this isn't based off of a 2D artwork, nor is it in the show. This is a very westernized bounty hunter representation of her. And we don't see this outfit right. Her bikini top is white and red, for example, versus her classic black and red. And then her shoes in this form would normally have red down the side versus the graphics in the middle. On top of that, we have the very Western holster that we do not see her wearing ever. And then this classic tattered kind of bounty hunter jacket we see here that we might see in like a Western. They made a very unique representation of Yoko, and although it's not from a 2D artwork, there's lots of fan artwork of her in this exact same pose, clearly inspired by this figure. And speaking of pose, let's go ahead and talk about it. Sure, she's kind of standing there T-posing at us, but you can just see her standing on the edge of a cliff, right, with the wind blowing right in her face. We see all that movement in her jacket, in her ponytail, and the wrinkles and the buckles. So all of it just really works together to make something that's far more exciting than simply standing there. And in this design, it's still able to give us all the normal elements we'd expect to see on Yoko, such as getting her full sniper rifle, her plump breasts, her slim stomach, right, her long legs, short shorts, like all these elements that make up Yoko, we've got in this rendition. So if all of this is so great, I mean, look at the score that it has, right? And everything that I've been saying about it and why so many people like this figure. What is my problem with it? What do I have against this figure? And I'm genuinely curious if you notice what it is. I'll give you a hint. It's on screen right now. And I'm also leaving this very static image up for a specific reason. And the last hint is that if you're an artist, I bet you've already noticed. Let's see if this helps. Her face is wonky. And I bet some of you all don't believe me right now. But I have this camera as straight onto this figure as possible. And I'll tell you right now, her nose is off center. Her mouth is off center, although we might be able to chalk that up to being a smirk. And her eyes are off center. And not only are they off center, they're also off axis to each other. I'll flash this back and forth a little bit to give your eyes time to adjust. You might not see anything wrong with it. A second ago, though, I mentioned if you're an artist, you might be able to visually see it. When this figure was made, I bet it was not done digitally. It was probably done by hand in clay and molded off of that. And every artist has a natural bias when they draw something, they sculpt something, they paint something. And the only way to break that bias is to either come back at a later time when you haven't been around the project, or something that digital art helps us out with, you can flip the image. And when you flip the image, your brain immediately has to adjust to what's there, and you'll immediately see those biases. So if you don't believe me that her face is wonky, watch what happens when I flip the image. If you couldn't see it before, I bet you can see it now. Her face is wonky. And now you can probably see that her nose is slightly offset, like I mentioned, and her mouth is definitely offset, though we can say it's a smirk. And holy shit, those eyes. Looking at it back again, and going back. Notice, like her breasts, for example, look the same when I go back and forth. That's because it's symmetrical, right? But as I'm flipping back on the face, your mind is having to look at it again, eliminating the bias that it had, and suddenly seeing all the flaws to it. This is the issue that I have with this figure. The face is completely off. And before someone jumps to the wrong conclusion, this is not just with my figure. As I mentioned in the modeling section, her eyelid line is modeled in. There's a recessed space for that decal to line up. And the decals for those eyes fit perfectly where they're modeled in. This is an issue with the modeling and sculpt of this figure, not with the printing. On screen is a customer photo from my figure collection where you can clearly see the eyes are wonky. Yet another example of a user with the same issue. And even more damning is that you can see it in the original prototype photos. Notice how in this one, the photographer has leveled the photo for her eyes. Look at the angle of the gun in comparison. So even the photographer has adjusted their perception to line up with the eyes at the awkward angle. But what specifically is off about it? We can do a few more demonstrations to show you. If we go back to this overlay, you can see where things mismatch. Again, the nose is slightly offset, the mouth is definitely offset, and the eyes are wonky. But let's have some fun in Photoshop and let's readjust a couple things. Based on the overlay I showed you, it made it seem like her right eye, for example, is up too high. So what happens if we take her left eye and correct it to that height? You get something like this. Go ahead and close your eyes for a second and open them to give your brain some time to adjust. With the left eye raised, I think we're pretty close to fixing the face, although I think they're up maybe a little too high. But let's see what happens when we flip that image. Suddenly, it's a little less jarring. It's still off, right? But at least her eyes are more in line with each other. And if I toggle it back and forth, it definitely seems like that eye is going up and down. Reverting back to normal, go and close your eyes and open them again. What if we take the right eye and lower it? You get something like this. Go ahead and close your eyes again and reopen them to give it time to adjust. And what happens when we flip this? Still better than what it was originally, but I think it's maybe a tad too low. So I think the other eye is a tad high. I think this one is a tad low to look normal. Let me go ahead and take that away. And if I toggle back and forth, once again, you can see an even more dramatic eye movement. So in order to fix this, I would argue we would need to move both of them, which will look something like this. Go ahead and close your eyes again and reopen them to give them time to adjust. Now let's take this and let's flip it back and forth. In this case, we have lowered the right eye and raised the left eye. I think this is much more accurate to Yoko, as it still looks more or less the same as we flip back and forth. Again, I'm showing you that internal bias that your brain has when it looks specifically at a face. Throughout this whole video, you got used to the angle that you were seeing her and your brain normalized it. But now that I've taken it out of that comfort zone, we can see that it was really off. So again, back to the original face, which might be kind of returning back to normal for you, but let's flip it. Definitely something seriously wrong here. Let's just flip back and forth for a split second. I'm going to put it back to inverted again, just so your brain doesn't try to fix it, right? This is the issue I have with this figure more than anything. It has got a great sculpt, a great paint job, a great pose. Aesthetically in the pose, it's very dynamic. And artistically, it's very engaging, right? This is a very iconic figure. But I think it's completely ruined by the face. Which is why, to me, this is no longer a grail. And like I said, if something were to happen to my collection, I wouldn't buy it again. Especially not at the 75,000 yen price point. But my gripes aside, trying to take a very objective step back, some of you might not really notice it, right? Especially once you kind of look at it for a second and your brain auto-corrects it. I can't deny that artistically, this is a very exciting figure. But for me, because of the wonky face, right, I'm going to dock it points. And because of that, I'm only going to give it a 2 out of 5. For value, there's two sides of this to discuss. We have the original MSRP back in 2009, and we have the aftermarket now. Back in 2009, buying an altar figure for sub $100 is crazy and is absolutely a 5 out of 5 deal, particularly given how good the figure is overall. But then we have the flip side, which is the current going rate of the aftermarket, which is about 76,000 yen. And it's at this point, it's really what this figure is worth to you, right? Are you willing to pay 76,000 yen for this after what I just showed you? For me, I understand where that value is coming from, right? This is a highly sought after figure. It's 16 years old and it's hard to obtain. Overall, it's very good. And I might be one of the few people that actually has an issue with it. But 76,000 yen sounds a little insane to me. I would be a lot more comfortable if the aftermarket was around the 40 to 50,000 yen range, maybe 55,000 being the max I'd be willing to pay if this were a grail of mine. If this figure were to be sold today, I would see this anywhere between the 28 to maybe 32,000 yen range. But for the sake of giving it a rating, if we went back to the original MSRP, I would be giving it a 5 out of 5. But if you were to buy this on the aftermarket, right, given how much you might personally value at, I would put it at more of a 2 out of 5 on that scale. 76 can be justifiable if this truly is one of your grails. So for the final score, I'll just kind of meet in the middle and give it a 3 out of 5. I hope you enjoyed seeing this figure today and hope it was worthy of episode 10 of Anime Figure Archive. Does this change at all your perception of it? Do you want it less knowing what you know now, or does this just reaffirm that it's still a grail for you? Definitely let me know in the comments below. It was kind of hard to come up with something clever to kind of put at the end of this for my certification. She's obviously a holy grail to many people, but to me that status has kind of been taken away. But I'm still very immature for my age, so this gave me a good chuckle. Wait, one sec. There we go. Now we've come full circle. I'm Senpai. Take care.